All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this Sunday evening, afternoon, or even possibly morning based on where you are in the world. We appreciate you taking the time to be a part of this Zoom where we're going to focus specifically on the science of nutrigenomics. We'll explain what that is and how it has an effect on neurodegeneration and specifically dementia. My name is Angie Huntley, and I have been representing a biotech company called LifeVantage for almost 9 years. And we have pioneered and specialize in a science called nutrigenomics. And what nutrigenomics is it is the formulation of very, very clean nutritional components that are formulated to kind of look like supplements. That's where the familiarity will be. However, instead of supplementing where there's lack in the body, we actually formulate our products to activate or turn on pathways in your genetics, which are dormant or off. Now, the science we can kind of get lost in the weeds, and we'll dip into some very scientific things during this time, and we'll cover some high level, which will just kind of scratch the surface because there's honestly more information than we can cover in this Zoom. But what we really want to do is be able to deliver to you the information that gives you an idea of how special what we have is. Now, basically, when you think about your DNA, a lot of us blame a lot of what's going on in our body on our DNA and on our genetics. We think that because of what our parents went through, what their parents went through, possibly what our siblings went through, and oh, sweet Tammy, bless your heart. And sorry, I looked at the chat there for a second. We tend to think that we're almost predestined to have specific health trajectories and wellness trajectories, and sometimes sickness and disease trajectories in our life. But 80% of your DNA is dormant, meaning it's kind of sleeping. It's gone a little bit lazy as we age. And our nutritional formulations turn those on. And what's amazing is we'll focus on the specific genetic pathways that are responsible for exponential healing and repair. One of the things that's amazing about that is that some of those pathways are really responsible for what's underlying to disease and aging as we know it. It's a pretty big deal when you hear someone say, man, I wish I could really get to the root of what's going on. And sometimes that thing has a name and sometimes it doesn't. We're getting to the root. So on a very high level, I want you to know that no matter what's going on in our bodies, and we're going to specifically look at dementia and neurodegeneration today, but whatever's going on in our bodies, it's supported by common dysfunctions in the cell that are common to all disease and aging, the vulnerability of aging as we know it. And so really the whole premise of our science and our company's mission is to target those dysfunctions that'll really kind of affect everything because it tends to get every cell well. And no matter what's going on in your body, we can break it down and say it's made up of cells. And that's how, we're kind of going deeper than just treating or managing a specific disease process or specific symptoms. So this became really, really important to me almost 9 years ago when we had a health crisis in our family with one of my youngest sons. I am a mother of 5 young men and grandmother, Gigi, to two very young. I have a newborn grandson and an almost 3-year-old grandson. And at the time that this found me almost 9 years ago, and I'll explain how it, kind of found me. I was very, very overextended. I was running a nonprofit in our home city. I live in Kalamazoo, Michigan, in Southwest Michigan. And my family was also opening a franchise restaurant. We were bringing into our family a 5th son who had been through severe trauma. And he was 15 at the time. And my 10-year-old, who was an identical twin, was having non-functional symptoms that he had had for almost the entire school year. And a dear friend of mine who is team teaching with me tonight, whose name is Shanell Hughes, reached out to me several times feeling that she really had something that would help my son. And I was very skeptical and I was not very open. I felt like I had tried everything and Western medicine wasn't really giving us anything at that point to help him. And I felt like I had tried everything naturally. And what Shanell said to me was a few things that caught my attention. And first, I want to tell you a little bit about Shanell. Shanell owns an adult foster care home here in Southwest Michigan. It's a senior care living center. And 9 years ago, they were really kind of end of life care. So people who were in hospice or needed round the clock care. And she really has a high level of conscientiousness and integrity and just extreme compassion in the care for all of her residents or patients. She normally has like 6 to 8 residents at a time. And I was familiar with Gull Arbor Senior Living, and I was familiar with people who had been there, and their stays were relatively short at that time. Well, how this connected was she shared with me when we were struggling with the health of our son. She shared with me that she felt like she had something that would help my son, Gabe. And she shared that the overseeing physician at Gull Arbor Senior Living had recommended that she integrate nutrigenomics into the care of every single resident. So really interesting. He also kind of encouraged her to research it because she wasn't going to research or she wasn't going to integrate anything into the care of her residents that she hadn't fully vetted. And so she did, and she researched it for months and months and months, about 8 months, almost a year when you think about it, to be able to research like a proprietary natural product. And there really is that much research. So a lot of that got my attention. First, the fact that the physician had recommended that she integrate nutrigenomics and that he wanted to integrate nutrigenomics into the care of all the residents in this facility. I also knew Shanell to be so diligent. Like she is a leave no stone unturned kind of person. And it helped that I knew her really well, that we were really good friends. So I knew when she said that she researched it for 8 months, I thought, wow, I can't believe there's that much research, but I knew that she did it. And then she shared with me that after the research, she felt a green light to integrate it into the care of her residents, and many whom she experiences with neurological degenerative diseases or dementia. Now, not all neurological degenerative diseases have a dementia component, but many of them do. So she's seen really, really wonderful things and so excited for her to share tonight as well. But before I have her share, I want to kind of share how our partnership arose. She told me that she started putting every resident on it, and that, like, she said 3 things that really got my attention. She said, Angie, I have people coming out of hospice. Well, my dad had been in hospice for 2 years. We had 2 years of hospice. My dad had a neurological degenerative disease. She didn't know that at the time. And she said, and I've had people come out of dementia. Well, a component of my dad's neurological degenerative disease was dementia. And I couldn't believe that, like that really, and I didn't know Shanell to be an exaggerator or a bluffer or a liar. Like she's very, very truthful. She has the highest level of integrity. And she told me that she has a lot of people coming off meds. And so those 3 things I thought, okay, I don't know how I connect this to my 10-year-old son, but I'll listen. So it has been such a tool at her senior living center that as a business expense, it makes more sense for her to pay for every single resident to be on these nutrigenomic products, because they're more well and they're easier to care for. She has an easier time staffing uh, her staff and all of the caregivers at her facility to take care of these individuals. And the stories, honestly, I want to lead with that. But before I hand it over to Shanell, I just want to share with you a little bit why that was so powerful to me, and how the bridge, how there's a bridge and a connection between my story and Shanell's experience and stories. So almost 20 years ago, it'll be 20 years this September. my father passed away from progressive supranuclear palsy. It also has a dual diagnosis of corticobasal degeneration. Long words. Most people aren't aware of this diagnosis, but it's a neurological degenerative disease. And my dad was in his 60s when he passed. And so the onset and progression was quite long and quite cruel. And as you can imagine, it took us years to get a diagnosis because there's not many medical facilities that know the names of the things I just said. It's very rare. And so we had been to Cleveland Clinic and Mayo and you name it. We had gone everywhere to search for what was ailing my father. And we finally found a diagnosis at University of Michigan, and they couldn't do anything though. They just basically said, we'll have a name on it. We have a label on it. You can come in every so often and we'll measure the progression, but there's just not a lick we can do. And so, and I'm a doer and I'm a fixer. It's kind of what led me into this career path with putting nutrigenomics into people's hands. That was really, really hard for me to take. And so I fought tooth and nail in doing therapies with my dad and doing anything that I possibly could to slow the progression and to help him have any kind of quality of life. And basically, progressive supranuclear palsy is a disease that attacks the frontal lobe of the brain, and that is the part of the brain responsible for muscle function. And so he started losing first control of his tongue and lost the ability to speak very quickly. And we had to rely on asking him the right questions, and he could lift one finger for yes and two fingers for no. And obviously that's a really, really frustrating way to communicate, because if you don't know the right question to ask, how do you create a yes or no scenario? And then he lost the function of all of his facial muscles. So right now, even I have expression happening. My eyebrows are raising. You could see me frown. It's so much so he couldn't even keep his eyelids open. So his eyes were closed, and it's a really sad and scary thing when you see someone who can't utilize their facial muscles. So no communication whatsoever, because a lot of our communication, as you know, is nonverbal. But he couldn't verbalize, and he couldn't open his eyes, and he couldn't give us expression. And that tended to progress. He also had falls. He needed assistance walking and obviously eating, and slow progression. And then his death was very long and painful and quite violent, actually. And I knew, knowing Shanell like I did, I also knew some people in her facility going through the death process. There had been, quite a bit of violence with that, because it's a violent thing for people's organs to shut down, one at a time. And so for my dad's, it was, I wasn't quite ready for that. And, for him to go through that process when, you hear everybody talking about they saw a light and told everyone they loved them. And that was not our experience. And my dad passed at the age of 66. And there's a reason I'm telling you this story. One is I've become very, very, very invested in brain health, because I realized in watching my dad and measures that he had taken through the years to try to help his heart health, his high blood pressure, and the different things that he had struggled with. He had been hit by a car as a pedestrian in his early 20s. And so he had all these other health things going on, with his body. And when progressive supranuclear palsy kind of took a hold of him, none of it mattered, because he didn't have his brain anymore. When you don't have your brain health, you don't have anything else. And so stepping into nutrigenomics, there's many reasons for me and my family why we utilize nutrigenomics as a very powerful tool. And we can explain more, and we will, a little more, the science, but very specifically, the fact that everything we have affects every cell, and every cell, obviously, that includes brain cells. So we tend to see a cognitive and neuroprotective component to the different ways that we activate our genetic pathways. And sometimes as we're activating a genetic pathway to make what we need to kind of bring about health in every cell, what happens is you activate that pathway and it also starts to regulate other pathways that get dysregulated. Some of those pathways are really, really integral in certain neurodegenerative diseases and our cognition, our brain health overall. So I want to just give you one little tidbit, and then I'm going to hand it over to Shanell, because I know it can be confusing if this is your first introduction to nutrigenomics. And I want you to think of your DNA. I want you to think of it like my cell phone right now. My cell phone has a cute little picture of my grandson on it. And so it's doing some things. It's actually telling me the time if I angle it just right, so you guys can see it without the glare. I have a couple notifications on here. It tells me the date. It's doing quite a few things. It's powered on, but it's not doing everything that it can do, right? I'm not on a phone call right now. I'm not taking a video. I'm not voice recording. I'm not listening to a book. I don't have my dictionary open. I don't have my level going. There's so many things your phone can do. And unless you know how to activate a specific app, or unless you know how to activate a specific function within your phone, it won't work. And our DNA and our bodies are kind of like that. And that's what nutrigenomic activation is. If I didn't know that my phone had a flashlight, I may never be able to have the benefit of this light that's in here. And the programming is there. But until I have someone show me what switch to flip, then it doesn't do what it was created to do. And I want you to think of your DNA that way. With nutrigenomics, we utilize those nutritional components that know which switch to flip, to turn on something special in your DNA, and you were already programmed to bring about health and healing in every cell. And so I want to introduce you to Shanell Hughes, who introduced me to this almost 9 years ago. And Shanell is the mother of 7. She is the grandmother of 4. She is homeschooled all those kids and is a homeschool teacher still, because she still has children of school age that she is homeschooling. She's the owner of Gull Arbor Senior Living and Care Facility, and she's brilliant, and she represents LifeVantage as a nutrigenomic educator. And so, Shanell, first of all, I'm so glad you're here. But would you share with people a little bit, maybe pick up where I left off on how you were led to, how and why, like what hit you the most? And as you started integrating nutrigenomics into Gull Arbor and the residents' care, specifically with neurodegeneration and dementia, will you share some of the things that you've seen?
Yes, absolutely. It'd be my privilege. So I have grown up even in an AFC home. And so I've seen a lot of things. I've seen the dying process. I have wonderful memories of, we shared our house with elderly people, 6 people at a time. And I had great memories of that. And as I grew up, went away to college and different things, my mom continued in that. And my aunt actually and my cousin, so our whole family owns AFCs in the area. And so we're used to seeing the process and everything. It was about 2016, I took over my mom's facility. I'm 3rd generation. And I started doing things and seeing things, and it just more and more dementia and more Alzheimer's started just coming and earlier. And it's just more violent to watch. I mean, when you have that kind of a disease, you lose somebody twice. I mean, you lose them the first time mentally because they don't know who you are. You're looking in somebody's eyes like you see the person, but they don't see you back, and you don't see who they are anymore. And their manners are totally different. They're not recognizing you, different things. So it's really hard. And then you have, of course, when you lose them physically too. So you have these 2 very, big passings that you have with somebody like that. So I was seeing it more and more, and I had come to accept a lot of it growing up because I had seen, bits and pieces. but it just became more and more and more regular. And pretty soon I got to the point that I just couldn't accept it anymore. It's like, what is going on here? And these people I just love, when they come into your home and you're caring for them, they become your family too, because I have it set up like a home-like setting. It's not an institution. It's not a bunch of people. It's a home. And there's 6 at a time, and we do life together and stuff. And usually I was seeing people when I took over live about anywhere from 1 month when I got them on hospice, anywhere to about 18 months was usually the lifespan that I was seeing. And I hated that also. I mean, you love these people and you lose them so quickly. So I kind of stopped accepting it, and I started doing a lot of research, and I found that heavy metal poisoning is becoming more common and can occur as a result of industrial exposure, air, water pollution, food, medicines, improperly coated food containers. Like, I started looking into all of this. Like, this is where I need to go. Like, I'm just grasping at straws. What if I do this? And what if I do this? Can I help people? And so I started implementing these things and doing different things, and just didn't see anything great. I don't know if it was just too advanced or they were too older. And so I was working with a doctor, and he did take a more holistic approach, which is what I really appreciated. He kind of looked at people that were coming to my place and seeing like 17, 18 meds. And he's like, oh, this is half the problem. We've given a med, and then we had a side effect. So we're giving another med to help with that side. And pretty soon we're just up to all of this, and it's just all toxins going in the body. And it doesn't help. And so I talked with him a little bit more, and he continued with me too, doing research. We were both doing research, and he actually had a colleague that was a physical therapist in Hawaii that was utilizing this nutrigenomics approach. And he told him about it, and he's like, I have somebody that I think really needs to, and it was me, needed to hear this. So he brought it to me, and he's like, okay, this is what I'm seeing. And I looked at some of the studies, and this is what he's seeing. I totally trust him. And I'm thinking, okay, I want to see some studies first, and I want to go through it. What I was totally surprised on is that there were actually studies, but not only studies, but peer-reviewed studies. Like, I had studied a lot of meds that people brought me and said, well, what if we try this? And what if we try that? And I would always study them, and I would see, okay, so this corporation put this medication out, and they did the studies on it, and this is what they concluded. And I don't know, there was just a part of me that always thought, you know what, if somebody puts a medication out, somebody else should do the studies on it. And, there should be some peer-reviewed studies, not just the corporation. So when I saw that this was actually the case, and not only that, Primetime Investigation did a whole report on it, and I got to watch that. And then I saw there were 31 peer-reviewed studies from other very renowned institutions and universities. It got my attention, and I started just digging into all of these that were self-funded studies. And one of the things that caught my eye too was the National Institute of Aging. They did a clinical study that proved Protandim NRF2 in particular is the only natural proprietary product they ever tested to increase lifespan. So that kind of got my attention. That drew it at first, like, okay, let's go from there. And I continued doing research, and I just found that as I was studying it, I've never heard of oxidative stress before, but it just kept bringing me back to oxidative stress and oxidative stress. And then I started learning oxidative stress is the root of all disease, and that includes dementia and Alzheimer's and all of these other things that are coming up. So when I looked into Protandim NRF2, I saw that it reduces stress oxidation 40% in 30 days, 70% in 90 days. So it does build momentum. It is an accumulative thing. And I started just seeing, okay, I saw the possibilities come before me. Like, this might be able to do something here. Like, what's the possibilities? I myself struggled with a heart condition at the time and some other different health ailments. So I started taking it right away and had incredible results. Had my first normal EKG 3 months after taking it, which was huge. So I'm like, I had enough that I was like, I brought this to the families, and I said, okay, I have gone through all of this. I have seen the studies. This is what it's proven. It has absolutely proven to reduce stress oxidation, 100% efficacy in all people, mammals even. And I know it's linked to all diseases. And I just started bringing this out. Some of these studies are pretty renowned. Washington State University's study was, the best therapeutic and preventative course in the history of medicine. But still in the back of my mind, I was thinking, but will this work for an 80 or 90-year-old? Like, what if it's so advanced? Then what happens? So I started doing the NRF2 at the time. I had obviously some pretty sick people. I mean, we're dealing with hospice, end of stage life. Like, our care was it was high level care. And I'm happy to say we don't have that anymore. I'm really thankful for that. But at the time, we brought in some heavy care patients, and one of them happened to be a dear woman with supranuclear palsy. Now, at the time, I did not know Angie's father passed of that, because he passed before Angie and I even met and became friends. But she came to us. She definitely had the dementia component. She was struggling to acclimate. She would wake up each morning and it was unfamiliar surroundings to her. She was some combative at times, where you had to be like, it's okay. She couldn't remember why she was there, different things like that. She was doing these board fall backwards, just because, she's starting to lose all of her muscle tone and all of those things. She wasn't reading anymore, and that was a really passion of hers when she came to us. So, we were expecting her to pass within 6 months to a year. She had come to us, and that was the diagnosis, and we knew that it was a degenerative disease, where she was going to lose muscle control and stuff. So I started her on the NRF2. It was the only thing that we had at the time. But I say only thing. It's powerful. It's so powerful. And yet I didn't know. I'm just experimenting here with the residents at the time, having done research, knowing that it's not going to hurt them, but could it help them at 80 or 90? And so we started seeing things like, all of a sudden she was falling less. Her muscle tone was starting to become not decreasing. She was actually starting to pick up a book and even read some large print and different things. And we didn't see that as a huge thing at first, because again, I was unfamiliar with this disease also, of how violent it gets, until I had talked to Angie later, where her dad had gone with it. So we were just seeing some things like, okay, this is good. Maybe she's just acclimating to the house now. And, she's getting to know us all, and she's making sense. She's feeding herself. She's not falling as much. She's asking now to walk on her own, which we're like, no, we don't want to risk a fall, for sure. So we, continued to walk with her and stuff, and she just got quicker and faster and read more books. And pretty soon she's going out to get her hair done, and she's going, out with her daughter to lunch and different things like that. And we just started accepting that as like the norm, and she just didn't keep progressing. So she kept going back to the neurologist, and each year she had her yearly appointments, and he was like, no, you can't walk by yourself. There's just no way, because you have this. There's no remission. There's no cure. You really need to have somebody walk beside you. You never know when you're just going to fall. And so we continued on with that. But the little stinker took off sometimes, feeling so well, to the bathroom herself or something like that, because she was just feeling good. And she fought us on it. And finally, she's like, I can do this. And talked to her daughter, and her daughter's like, I'll make another appointment, but let's just let her, she's willing to take the risk. So she made another appointment, and the neurologist pretty much at the end said, I can't make sense of this. There is no cure. I can't make sense of why you don't have any markers anymore. You don't even have any markers for this. You're reading, you're feeding yourself, you're doing all of these things. And so they came back home to us and said, she's clear to walk herself. She can do it. So we did that, and she continued on, just doing really remarkably, until she it was 4.5, almost 5 years later, that she just started eating less, which is what we see now. Just starting eating less, being a little bit more tired, sleeping longer, taking longer naps, that kind of stuff. And one morning she just woke up and said, I don't feel like eating. I just want to sleep longer. And she took a very long nap, and that's how she passed. It was just so peaceful. It was nothing violent to what Angie said. So when I called Angie and said, hey, I have this other you know, thing that's I've noticed that's happened with supranuclear palsy. She was kind of like, "Come again, say that again. Like, what did you just say?" And I kind of told her our experience, and she's like, "What?" You know, like she was reading, she was feeding herself. I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, she could even look at you. I'm like, "Oh yeah." She was talking, she answered questions. Like, yeah, and she didn't even have any dementia component whatsoever. Um, and she's like, "I can't even make sense of that." So that was something that was like, okay. But we've also seen in that time of implementing, obviously we've seen medications go off. We've had people come with off from hospice, but even we've had people that have been so depressed and suicidal, even start smiling again and laughing and just feeling better. Like they can't even explain it. They're just like, I just feel good. um and so we've had that too. We had a man that was falling, and he was dementia. Also, we had him on NRF2. He was doing pretty good, but the dementia was catching up, and so we put him on the collagen for his knees. And we were just expecting maybe him to fall less, hopefully, because he was a larger man. I didn't want to ask him to leave, our one person caregiver facility. But to my surprise, starting with collagen, he started talking again, making sense. Like we were seeing improvement in that. So then I had to go back and start doing some more studies on collagen, and found out that the brain is made up of collagen, and the NRF2 and the synergy to collagen together. And I mean, what I was expecting from what you hear from the world, hair, skin, nails, bones, collagen's great for you for those things, wasn't expecting such a huge turn of the events or change in collagen with dementia too. So our products with reducing stress oxidation, and even sirtuins, when our NAD came out. Angie's going to go through a little bit more of these products, but even with the NAD, I was doing a lot of research on sirtuins and found that it has a lot of benefits neurologically, and our sirtuin raises sirtuins 100% in 24 hours. So I also started that. So we have a lot of products that help with neurodegenerative disease, and I found that each one, and the more I did, helped with the person in dementia. I'm still under. I still would say it's better to get ahead of it. Like I would still tell everybody, hey, start in your 40s, start in your 50s if you're talking about mental health here, and get ahead of it and just maintain a healthy versus 80s and 90s. But I can also tell you, in your 80s and 90s, I've seen improvement. I've seen great things, and the longer they were on it too. It wasn't like a miraculous overnight thing. It was just month after month after month of charting and charting and charting and going back and saying, wait a minute, she was doing this here. I forgot about that. She's not doing that anymore. And so definitely charting it out, because you do forget as they slowly gain um, and just get better. You slowly forget how they were or what they did do. And because it does gain momentum and it does get better increasingly over time. And so for us to go back and do shift notes and like, oh my goodness, I forgot that she did that, or I forgot this was the case then, and then see where she was a year later, 2 years later. It was 2 years after this lady came to us that she actually, the neurologist said there's no markers anymore. And that was incredible in and of itself. So, yeah, are there other questions?
And she was in her 90s.
She was in her 90s. She was 92 when she came to us. Yep. And she died at 97.
And I know, I mean, that just is mind blowing to me,
Yeah.
because, we should be more vulnerable and have a harder time, the older that we get.
Mhm.
And so to see someone in their 90s that was progressed enough, and it was interesting because my dad's dementia component, like we could tell there were still behaviors even when someone can't talk. There were things he had done prior to some of the other symptoms setting in that were definitely in retrospect were components of dementia, but
Mhm.
because the disease hadn't been diagnosed, we just thought he was misbehaving. We did, you don't put a label on it then. And then when he lost his ability to communicate, um, there were still some behaviors that we could pinpoint, because so often, again, you can tell by speaking. So I say all this because it's even more amazing that you had Dolores who could freely speak and freely read, and you weren't seeing the dementia component anymore.
She had
When we,
diabetes really bad also too. Like her blood sugar was way out of control when she came to us too. So that was another component that we're dealing with, that most people, with really way out of control blood sugars to live to be 97, with everything else too. And her blood sugars were remarkable. We were able to keep them, in balance. With, obviously we used insulin too, but she didn't have like this huge dose. We were able to manage her, very well. But one of the other studies, Angie, that I did that was very compelling for me to do this was glutathione. I just started studying glutathione, which you don't hear about. Like, I just didn't hear about so much of this stuff from doctors, and I just don't think they understand or know this. But it is a master antioxidant. I mean, it is the most important molecule that we have. And so it talks about, increasing your glutathione will do crazy things for even dementia, Alzheimer's, cognitive, anything, but all kinds of diseases also, MS, Parkinson's, Lou Gehrig, like everything that you're talking about here. And so when I saw that also the NRF2 raises glutathione 300% naturally, that was huge. I mean, your body makes it. Your body is supposed to make glutathione. So when I was doing all of these studies and realizing, wait a minute, we're trying to medicate and do all this stuff synthetically, tricking our bodies or shutting off different things when our body is capable of making it. And the more I studied, the more I'm like, okay, our bodies have the best MDs already in them. Our cells know what's going on, and when they're working at their best, and when the stress oxidation is lowered, they can do and target what they need to target in the body. And honestly, when I started learning their slogan for LifeVantage, "Take it to make it," yes,
yeah,
was like, oh my goodness, that makes so much sense. Like, if we can increase the body's capability. And then I started, wait a minute, why isn't our bodies making it anymore? And then that took me back to where my studies started with, and I was grasping at straws what to do with Alzheimer's and how to help all these. And I got right back to heavy metal poisoning. And I'm starting to realize the industrial pollution that we have, the water pollution, like I said, the food, the medicines, even improperly coated containers, pots and pans, all of that stuff. Like, we're just bombarded with 300 sextillion free radicals a day. And the whole job of the glutathione is to capture those free radicals and take them out of our body. And it's a master regulator at that. So when I started realizing that our body can make that, we can increase the possibilities of it. And when you give something that your body can make, there's no side effects. And I was dealing with side effects galore with medications. Like, it was so frustrating to give a medication, but then bite your nails at what kind of side effect is going to happen, especially when you're dealing with psych meds, like boomeranging and different things happening. And what else is going to happen? Like, it's tense. It's very intense. And so when we have, like, okay, our bodies can make glutathione and we increase it 300%, our body's made to do it. There's no side effects to it. There's no side effects to what your body can make. I only got the benefits of it. And it was just beautiful.
yeah. And essentially what we're talking about is we have a product line, a nutrigenomic product line, and each one of our nutrigenomic activators activate the body's ability to make what you need. And so Shanell's been talking about this, what Protandim NRF2 was that first product that she integrated into Gull Arbor that lowers oxidative stress more than any food, drug, or supplement. So to kind of connect the dots, oxidative stress is one of those dysfunctions in the cell that supports all disease. And when she says disease can't exist without that root of oxidative stress, she's right. So I went to pubmed.gov, which is just the National Institute of Health, like literally public medical reference library, to look at what peer-reviewed published studies have been done. Now, there are like hundreds of thousands of studies on PubMed on oxidative stress, and they all are streamlined into specific, usually disease processes. So I search in dementia, and oxidative stress and hit the search key. Almost 10,000 published journal articles linking dementia to oxidative stress. Well, when you activate your NRF2 pathway with this little guy here, you're lowering that oxidative stress. So you're like kind of knocking a leg out from under the table. If the tabletop is dementia, it's going to have a hard time to exist if we can knock out oxidative stress. So Shanell mentioned glutathione, and glutathione is a master antioxidant, only one of which of many that your NRF2 pathway actually makes once you're activating it. But if we just scratch the surface here, because again, we can't dig into the weeds, which is really fun actually, because Shanell researched it for 8 months, and I'm sure she was having fun because
Yes.
you're on like a hunt. It's really exciting when you start seeing the power of what this is. Your NRF2 pathway, when activated as strongly as we activate, and I have to include that because there's things out there that kind of activate it, like broccoli scratches the surface of it, turmeric kind of scratches the surface of it, but we have a formulation of 5 herbs that the way they're formulated, when the plants were harvested, the amounts that are put into it, it activates so strongly that NRF2 pathway. It's the difference between my 2-year-old grandson hitting my table with a plastic hammer and Arnold Schwarzenegger coming in and lifting up a sledgehammer to it. Like, they're just different. And so when we activate our NRF2 pathway, your glutathione increases by 300%. There's 1,677 articles on the benefits of glutathione with Alzheimer's, with dementia, with sometimes that neurodegeneration is kind of lumped in there as well. These are just some of the studies that Shanell was mentioning. We have 31 and counting peer-reviewed articles on just that Protandim NRF2, on that activator, that support, again, what your NRF2 pathway, when activated with nutritional components, there's ways that you can toxically activate it. And by that, I mean, like, there's a pharmaceutical that's been banned that activates NRF2 because it's so toxic. There's another one that's a leading treatment for MS, and they are one of our studies that I love to show people, because that pharmaceutical company compared their NRF2 activator, which has a lot of side effects, and against the potency of ours, and they have to conclude in their conclusion that ours is more than twice as effective in activating that NRF2 pathway. So you have a lot of people paying millions of dollars to study this who actually would make more money if they proved us wrong. And that's really some wonderful validation. So if what we say sounds too good to be true, don't believe us. Be skeptical. We live in a world where skepticism helps because there's a lot of bad out there. And so do your own research. We encourage you to do that. In fact, whoever invited you to this call will have ways to get you more research. We're just introducing you to this. But there's a few things that we have to cover because we start hitting a sweet spot when we start looking not only at our product line of activators, but they start synergizing with each other and they start making each other stronger. And you heard Shanell kind of dip into, she started adding different activators to the use of the NRF2 and started seeing even more potency and even more strength. So I just want to introduce to you again a little of my research. We have an activator that activates another pathway that's responsible for your mitochondria strengthening and multiplying. It's a big deal because mitochondrial dysfunction is up there in the amount of studies as oxidative stress, as what's supporting disease processes and aging with the dysfunctions in the cell. So I searched mitochondrial dysfunction and dementia. There were 4,400 studies linking mitochondrial dysfunction to dementia. When you activate your NRF2 pathway with our nutritional formulation, your NRF1 pathway, it increases and strengthens your mitochondria, multiplying 70%. It's incredible. It's radical. Then we have another activator that activates your NAD, which, as Shanell mentioned, your NAD is responsible for the manufacture of these wonderful things in your body called sirtuins. So I just searched because we have the most powerful NAD activator as well. 447 studies. Now, like that's still a lot of studies when you look at NAD and dementia. And when you look at other, like Shanell said, when I would look at maybe some other treatments and the studies that have been done, I sometimes couldn't find any. And so to see almost 500 studies with that connection is pretty strong. And even more than that, that's why we started with stories and not information today, because I think the stories are what's so important. I've been doing this for almost 9 years. Shanell's been doing this for 9 years. We've seen really, really tremendous things. We have seen people score higher on their cognition tests with their neurologists when they had already been in progressing dementia. So we get to see firsthand the special things. I just want to show you that we have the science to back up the stories and why we see what we see. And so Shanell mentioned our activated collagen. And again, we're taking something to make it. We're activating 3 pathways in your genome that are responsible for manufacturing collagen, which is the most prominent protein in your cells. And we activate the genetic pathway that's responsible to protect your collagen from loss. And yes, we look pretty when we have collagen. We look younger, our skin is firmer, our hair is growing, our nails are growing. But with our collagen, that's just a little bit of evidence of what's happening to the brain, to the heart, to every connective tissue. And where we start to see a wonderful synergy between NRF2 and activated collagen, we started seeing things like my friend Heidi is on this call. She has a 70-year-old, now he's 72, but when he was 70, when our collagen came out, he was nonverbal autistic. And he's been talking. She added collagen to his activation regimen, and he's verbal now. And she just messaged me even before this call and said, and we were talking about something totally not even related to this, but when she mentioned her brother, she said he started talking and he hasn't stopped yet. He has a lot of catching up to do. But when we see those kinds of special things that I know sound too good to be true, but you have a too good to be true body. It's not so much that our products are too good to be true. It's that we're choosing to use nutrition that your body's created to absorb to turn on what your body has already been programmed to do. And so I want to share with you just a little glimpse of how special these two, when they're synergized together, are. Now, when you take the activated collagen and our Protandim NRF2, it regulates close to 3,000 survival genes. Now, when you have genes that, when overstimulated, are responsible for autoimmune processes and neurodegeneration and the mastitization of cancerous tumors, and those are like genes that are acting up, it's a wonderful thing to be able to down regulate those genes. If you have genes that are supportive, like NRF2, that are supportive of good things like antioxidant pathways and fighting those dysfunctions, but they're underperforming, we want those to come up. And so when I say regulation, I mean, we're telling the bad genes to behave, and the ones that are doing more good, we're empowering them to do what they were created to do. So when you think of 3,000 genes, including the genes that are responsible for your immune health, it just kind of resets your immune system. Now, why is that a really big deal? Now, I won't read you this whole paragraph, but I just want to draw you to the highlighted area. Well, let me back up. Let's actually back up more than the highlighted area. In that top paragraph and that last sentence, the combination of these products significantly downregulated genes involved in the NF-kappa B, it's NF-kB pathway, such as these three, reducing their expression by 20, 33, and 30%. So if we hop up to that highlighted area, therefore, the observed downregulation of NF-kappa B related genes suggests that the Healthy Glow Essential Stack may modulate pathways associated with neuroinflammation and neurodegeneration. That's a really, really, really big deal. This further supports the potential neuroprotective benefits of the Healthy Glow Essential Stack through its regulatory effects on genes linked to oxidative stress and inflammation. So we see that connection. We see like, okay, when people are adding this in, that's why we're getting, we can't give you a graph where you're going to see 3,000 of the genes, but they're all very, very important, and they all are either supportive and of a dysfunction that's wreaking havoc, or they need to be utilized more because they're bringing health and healing. And so, when you add the activated collagen, yes, you see special things with people's skin. But I show you this not to get off track, and I'm not trying to sell you a cosmetic product. I want you to see, like, this is what's happening. Like, look at my friend's legs down here on the bottom. That's what's happening to the organs. Like, that's what we're seeing happening to the internal organs when people are utilizing this together. And that's why I love showing the external, because you can't always see what's happening on the internal, but you can start to have things happen, like someone become verbal. And I know that Shanell utilized with a patient who had like a spinal surgery,
Mm-hmm.
and I think for her healing, they wanted the NRF2 and activated collagen. It's incredible, incredible for chronic pain and for healing from wounds and injury. And we've seen amazing things with recovery of surgery. But I think that's why the chart is so important. I love that you have the benefit of the chart, Chanel, because I remember when that was happening and you guys were talking about her sundowners
Mm-hmm.
was diminishing, which wasn't even on your radar at the
No.
time.
We're
Um,
seeing some crazy things. And even the person that you just talked about with the spinal, she came to us from rehab that couldn't do anything more. They were just like, she just needs to go to a nursing home. She was not making any progress, wasn't healing, wasn't able to move, just like she came from rehab who couldn't do anything. And then she comes to us and we just started on the NRF2 and collagen. And within a week's time, she is standing up. Her incisions completely healed that they were struggling with. And she's getting out of bed. She's taking steps. By the end of the month, she was ready to go home. With her husband was there, not taking care of herself completely, but her husband was there and he could manage that then at that point, like doing the rest of her care and continuing on with her healing process. But to see that she went from rehab to say she just needs a nursing home, they were ready to tell her husband, and her husband thought the same thing, like she needs a nursing home now. I mean, she'll never be able to come home again. And in 30 days time with NRF2 and collagen, we had her ready to go back home again with her husband caring for her. Um,
and
yeah.
will you share a little bit about what sundowners is? Because I mentioned that, and I don't know that everyone on the call knows what sundowners is.
Yeah, so we experienced that. It's very common in older people. And it's called sundowners because it usually happens right about like they'll wake up and they're doing great in the morning, and right around 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we see a progression of dementia and confusion through the night until morning again. So it happens mostly. It's called sundowners because as the sun goes down, you see a change. And so yeah, we definitely have seen progress with the collagen and the NRF2. We had a lady that came to us with sundowners, and she's actually improving. She maintained for a little while and was improving, and then all of a sudden, instead of 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it was more like 3 or 4. And she's sleeping at night now. And when she first came to us, she couldn't even get up and use the bathroom herself. And now she is able to use the bathroom in the night, herself, take herself to the bathroom. So yeah, we just see incredible things even with sundowners, which I hadn't found too much, studies on with this. But again, I looked into oxidative stress. I'm like, okay, if there's a link there, I'm trying it, and there was. So we did the NR2 and the collagen. Whenever there's a brain component to it, I am incorporating the collagen now because it isn't just hair, skin, and nails. It's a
No,
huge with
no.
activation of the collagen. We see a huge thing in brain.
And also, I remember you had a gal that was there for end of life, and she had been nonverbal, and her husband kind of counted on her being nonverbal, and then she started talking. She got her verbal skills back, kind of like Heidi's brother. Different, obviously different circumstances, but we were seeing those light bulbs
Yeah.
happen. Yeah.
Yes. And she let him know that she did not like everything she was hearing when she wasn't able to say anything. So,
It's
yes, so
interesting.
she got her words back. And
I remember the comical component to that is I remember
yes.
you saying, I don't think the husband's very happy. She can talk now.
No, she's been
Um,
listening. She's been listening, which we knew the whole time. And I tried to tell the family, like, she can hear what you're saying. She just can't communicate
yeah.
back, but she's listening. So,
Yes.
and she got the component to be able to share that she was listening. So, yeah.
Wow. Wow. We have an NRF2 activated drink that focuses on your brain health. And I won't go deep into that, but you can just kind of see the visual. This was given to a child with the NRF2, our NRF1, and an Axio. And you can just see the difference between spelling words prior and then 2 weeks after, utilizing that every day. You can see such a difference, obviously, in cognition. And I wanted to just share, and I'll try to wrap up with this too, because I know we're nearing the top of the hour and we will take questions if anyone has them. But we recently in October released a GLP-1 activator. And for a lot of people, GLP-1 means weight loss, metabolic health. The wonderful thing that we see with LifeVantage is we look at the whole body and how everything is intertwined and everything is connected, and how as one thing becomes balanced, there's a ripple effect. And there's a reason we call our GLP-1 activator, we call it mind body, because the GLP-1 is one of several hormones in the gut brain axis, meaning that there needs to be communication in our body through these hormones and these sets of hormones between our gut and our brain. And Alzheimer's, it has been called type 3 diabetes. Like that's how much there's like a tie to blood sugar, metabolic health, and this connection that we're speaking of. So we have this two-part system that activates the body's production of GLP-1. It also down-regulates hormones that have been naughty and need to get back in line, and bringing the GLP-1, which is the good guy, up. And we start to see wonderful things with the brain, with the heart, with the pancreas, with the liver, but also metabolic health, with blood sugars, and with weight loss or weight management. Some people needed to gain muscle, and it's really helped body composition. Now, where this all ties in is, oh, I guess I kind of slid past that, is that, as you can imagine, you probably could assume I was going to mention this, we see a synergy between the NRF2 and our mind body. And we did an in vitro study, which means we did a cell study studying like what is happening when you're taking these two together. Similar to, now remember, with the healthy glow, which is NRF2 and collagen, this is the healthy weight. And we see 4 new antioxidant pathways activated. So remember what a big deal oxidative stress is? It's one of those dysfunctions within the cell. Not only do you have NRF2, you have 4 more antioxidant pathways that are going to hit that hard and lower that dysfunction. Does that have an effect on dementia and brain health? Absolutely. And then we also have 9 new fat and fatty acid pathways that are activated and regulated, and that amplifies your metabolism and balances your metabolic health. Does that have a brain health and dementia component and neuroprotective component? Absolutely. But here's the big one. Here's where I want to highlight and kind of sit for the last, well, we're out of time, but I'm going to keep going. So I know I'll go fast. The health, we see 22 more genes regulated that have the responsibility of restoring, rebuilding, and renewing internal organs, including your brain. That's a really, really big deal. So we're seeing improved cognition and improved coordination and signaling and impulses. I can't even imagine what that of just that last picture on the right. When I think of what that would have meant for my dad, it would have meant everything for my dad. So I dug in a little, as you can imagine, because I wanted to look like, okay, there's basically 35 new genes regulated. and and we're starting to see things like we have a colleague who's a dear friend. This has only been out since October, who's already scoring higher on his cognition, or I'm sorry, her husband, who had progressive dementia, and it was really leveling off and stopping the progression, and she was seeing a slow improvement on our other activators. She added mind body because of this, and he is scoring higher and higher on his cognition test. So I wanted to dig in a little bit at the cells, or I'm sorry, the genes that are regulated. And I'll just share with you really quickly. There's this specific gene called ICAM5. We are able to regulate that by 1,246% when you are combining the NRF2 with the mind body. Now, this is a big deal, and I'll probably jump to the bottom, but it's too big of a deal. So it, ICAM5 is involved in the adhesion of cells, particularly in the brain, 1,246%, guys. It contributes to the interactions between neurons and other cells, which is essential for maintaining proper brain structure and function. It plays a role in the development of plasticity of the nervous system. It helps guide axons and influences the formation of synaptic connections, which are critical for learning and memory. ICAM5 may also be involved in signaling pathways that affect neuronal activity, synaptic function, and the brain's ability to respond to stimuli. Like other ICAM family members, ICAM5 can interact with immune cells, playing a role in inflammation and immune responses within the brain, which is important for neuroinflammatory processes. So ICAM5 is primarily important in the brain, supporting neuronal adhesion development and synaptic plasticity, while also contributing to the regulation of immune responses in the nervous system. I know this page is a lot of science, but it may make your eyes roll back, but it's a really, really, really big deal. And I'll try to stick to the big things. We have another gene called CDK5, which we're able to regulate by 284%. This one specifically calls out neurodegeneration. The dysregulation of CDK5 activity has been linked to neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease. In these conditions, aberrant activation of CDK5, and it's often involving abnormal interactions with regulatory subunits, which is another gene there. It can lead to neuronal damage and dysfunction. For example, hyperactivation, which means this gene is getting out of control. It needs to come down. So that hyperactivation of CDK5 has been implicated in that's a long word that even when I looked up the definition, it's still pretty confusing. So we won't go there, but it's been implicated in movement of the tau protein. Now, the tau protein was the culprit in my dad's disease. I had researched his enough to know. It's a hallmark also of Alzheimer's disease. And so the regulation of protein synthesis and signaling affecting multiple signaling pathways that are critical for neuronal function. If I jump to the bottom there, that the CDK5 is involved in various aspects of neuronal development, synaptic plasticity, neurogenesis, and memory formation. It's essential for brain function, and its dysregulation can contribute to neurodegenerative diseases. So how much of a big deal is it for us to regulate that gene if the dysregulation can contribute to neurodegenerative disease? And then lastly, I just wanted to highlight that last sentence of this FXR1. And I know the genes have funny names and we're not used to it. And I don't expect, there's not going to be a quiz. There's not going to be a quiz, but I just want you to know, like, this is out of the 35, I grabbed 3. So there's a lot more, but I figured you all didn't want a human genome project happening tonight on the Zoom. It might be more than you bargained for. The FXR1 helps control essential processes for learning, memory, and overall neuronal function. It is also implicated in neurological conditions, and that's a very specific one, and other cognitive disorders when its function is disrupted. So again, how wonderful to bring it into balance. And lastly, I'll just kind of leave you with this thought and then we'll take questions, is when you think of activation, I want you to think of like your genes like a symphony. And if you were to go to an orchestra, when you're hearing all of the instruments out of tune and they're going through the tuning process, it sounds like a mess, doesn't it? Like, you hear loud and off and low and high and all, and no one's in tune, no one's coming together. And that's kind of when we talk about, and you probably, for some of you, this is the first time you've been introduced to getting genes regulated. But think of it like your genes are like, they can very much be that very out of tune orchestra. And there's something really beautiful that happens when they all come into tune and the conductor starts and they can play and become this beautiful, beautiful symphony, all working together. And they couldn't actually make that final product of music without, the French horn, the bassoon, and the percussion and the flute, and they all have that role. And sometimes in our culture with medicine, we think all you need is a flute. That's all you need. Let's just get that flute going. And we just think we're going to focus on the flute and just wonder why everything's not okay. It's because there's more players. And so that's one of the things that has encouraged me so much in our nutrigenomic journey is when you see something that has the ability to start affecting and have a ripple effect within your body on the different systems, and you start to see the cells and your different organs all cooperating with each other as these pathways become regulated. It's really, really a powerful thing. And so I'm just grateful that you were all here. I truly feel the first day when I sat down at Shanell's adult foster care home and I listened to the information and I really just wanted to help my son. I just needed something. I thought I needed an answer, but what she put in my hand was something that I first of all got really, really upset that I just can't believe I live in a world where if this is really true, why haven't I heard about this? And that's the passion that kind of rises up in Shanell and I and many others on this call and whoever invited you, is that everyone needs to at least know what you do with this information is completely up to you. If you have more questions, we'll stop recording here and you can freely ask. And if we don't know the answers, we'll make sure that we can find the person who does. But whoever invited you to this call will have a connection as well to get you information that you need. And so I'm going to stop the recording. Thanks everybody for joining us.